What's the first image that comes to mind when you hear the words alien encounter, little green men, giant heads and black eyes, floating silver ships? We've been conditioned by movies and television to imagine extraterrestrials as either terrifying monsters or wise saviors. But the real encounters, the ones reported by actual people, investigated by authorities, documented in declassified files, they're stranger than fiction. And here's the shocking truth most people don't know. They're not always scary. Sometimes they're curious. Sometimes they're helpful. Sometimes they're just confused. Tonight, we're exposing the truth about realistic alien encounters. Not Hollywood versions, real stories, real witnesses, real questions that have never been answered. We'll explore encounters that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew. And by the end, you might just realize that if they are out there, they might not be what we fear at all. Before we journey into these encounters, I have a gentle request. If this voice has ever been a comforting presence in your night, please consider subscribing to this channel. Think of it as a signal, a way to ensure this quiet space remains available whenever you need it. Now, let that intention drift away. Your only task tonight is to listen with an open mind and to let these stories carry you. August 21st, 1955, Kelly, Kentucky. A small farmhouse outside the tiny town of Hopkinsville. 8 adults and 3 children lived there, the Sutton family. No telephone, no radio, no television, just the woods, the night sky, and each other. Around 7 p.m., a family friend named Billy Ray Taylor went to fetch water from the well in the backyard. He looked up and froze. A silvery object was descending from the sky, bright, metallic, with an exhaust trail, all the colors of the rainbow. It passed over the house, stopped in midair, and dropped straight to the ground behind the barn. Billy Ray ran inside. He told the family what he'd seen. They laughed. They didn't believe him. About an hour later, the dog started barking, uncontrollably. Lucky Sutton and Billy Ray grabbed their guns and went to investigate. At the back door, they saw a glow. And in that glow, a figure, about 3.5 feet tall. Oversized head, almost perfectly round. Arms so long they nearly reached the ground. Hands with talons. And eyes large, glowing eyes that seemed to shine with a yellowish light. The creature's body shimmered in the darkness, like it was made of silver metal. It raised its hands toward them, not threatening. Almost like it was surrendering, like he fired. The shotgun blast should have destroyed anything that size. But the creature just flipped backward like a gymnast, scrambled to its feet, and ran into the darkness, unharmed. This was just the beginning. Minutes later, another creature appeared at a side window. They fired again, same result. Then another, on the roof, reaching down with clawed hands, touching the hair of someone standing below. They fired upward. The creature floated down from the roof and scurried into the woods. For the next several hours, the creatures kept coming, sometimes one, sometimes several. They appeared at windows, on the roof, in the trees. They moved with impossible speed. They seemed curious, not aggressive, watching, reaching, but never actually harming anyone. But they wouldn't die. The family emptied boxes of ammunition, shotgun shells, rifle rounds. The creatures just flipped, ran, and returned. Finally, around 11 p.m., they couldn't take it anymore. They ran to their cars and drove to the Hopkinsville police station at top speed. When they arrived, they were genuinely terror-struck. The police chief later said, "These aren't the kind of people who normally run to the police for help. What they do is reach for their guns, yet here they were. Women and children hysterical. One man had a pulse of 140 beats per minute. Police returned to the farm with them. They found shell casings everywhere, evidence of a genuine firefight, but no creatures. No bodies, no proof, except the terror on 11 faces. The Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter became national news. The New York Daily News blared, "Spaceman take Kentucky," The Los Angeles Times ran it on the front page. Skeptics had their theories. Maybe it was owls. Great horned owls can look strange in the dark with their large eyes and talons. Maybe it was a hoax for attention, but here's what investigators found. The witnesses were interviewed separately, repeatedly. Their stories never changed. The details remained consistent for decades. One of the women, Glennie Langford, was described by researchers as a somber, no-nonsense matriarch who hated the spotlight. She had no reason to lie. Years later, the daughter of one of the witnesses wrote books about the incident. She revealed something interesting. The creatures weren't green at all. They were gunmetal gray. The little green men phrase came from a reporter who combined Kelly Green with the story, and the family themselves called them something else. Goblins. Glennie Langford, a deeply religious woman, thought they were something the devil had brought forth. But here's the detail that makes this case so compelling. The creatures never hurt anyone. Not once. They reached, they watched, they retreated when fired upon. But they never attacked. What if they weren't there to fight? What if they were just curious? But not all encounters are peaceful. In the early 1990s, a story emerged from the former Soviet Union. A story so bizarre, so disturbing that it found its way into declassified CIA files. The date is uncertain, somewhere between 1989 and 1990. A Soviet military unit was conducting training exercises in Siberia. Then they saw it. A low-flying spacecraft, saucer-shaped, hovering above them. One soldier panicked. He fired a surface-to-air missile. The missile hit. The craft crashed to Earth. The soldiers approached the wreckage. 5 figures emerged. Small humanoids about 4 feet tall. Large heads. Large black eyes. They looked around at the soldiers, at the damaged craft. Then something impossible happened. The 5 beings moved toward each other. They merged. Their bodies flowing together, combining into a single sphere. The sphere began to pulse with light. It grew larger. It started to buzz and hiss. And then it exploded. A flash of light so bright, so intense, that it blinded everyone who looked directly at it. When the light faded, 23 soldiers lay motionless on the ground, not dead, not injured, turned to stone. Their living cells had been transformed into something like limestone. They stood there, frozen like statues, unmoving, unbreathing. 2 soldiers survived. They had been standing in the shade, partially shielded from the light. The military descended. The area was sealed. The petrified soldiers and the craft were transported to a secret research facility near Moscow. Soviet scientists studied them for years. They couldn't explain it. The soldiers' bodies had been completely transformed at the molecular level. The CIA report concluded, if the KGB file corresponds to reality, this is an extremely menacing case. The aliens possess weapons and technology that go beyond all our assumptions. They can stand up for themselves if attacked. But here's where we need to pause. That story, the Soviet soldiers turned to stone, it's one of the most dramatic alien encounter stories ever told. It's also probably not true. The CIA file exists. It's real. You can find it in their database. But here's what the file actually is. A summary of a newspaper article. Published in a Ukrainian paper in 1993. Picked up by a Canadian tabloid. Then summarized by a CIA analyst. The analyst wasn't confirming the story. They were just noting that it existed. Former CIA agent Mike Baker put it bluntly, if there was an incident, regardless of the nature of the incident, I suspect that the actual report doesn't look much like what has now come out from 5 or 6 or 7 iterations of what originally was written. The story grew in the telling, like a game of telephone played across continents and decades. Does that mean it's false? Not necessarily. But it means we have to be honest about what we know and what we don't. What we do know is this. Something happened. Enough to generate a report. Enough to be preserved in government files. What actually happened? That remains a mystery. But some encounters are different. Some are gentle. In 1945, a 9-year-old boy named Jose Padilla was horseback riding in the New Mexico desert with a friend. They were about 13 miles from the Trinity nuclear test site, where the world's first atomic bomb had been detonated just weeks earlier. They heard an explosion. They thought it was another bomb test. But when they rode toward the sound, they saw something else, smoke rising from the ground. And in the smoke, a crashed aircraft, but not like any aircraft they'd ever seen. It was shaped like an avocado, metallic, strange. Then, movement. 3 figures emerged from the craft, small, not threatening. They seemed confused, disoriented. They ran in circles, making strange movements. Jose wasn't afraid. He later said they had crashed at my father's ranch, and they needed help. Over the next 10 days, the military arrived and cleaned up the wreckage. Jose and his friend watched from a nearby ridge, hiding behind cactuses. When the soldiers took a break, the boys snuck into the craft. The beings were gone. But Jose found something, a small dial attached to the inner wall. He pulled it off, hid it, and kept it for the rest of his life. Decades later, in 2015, a chemical testing lab analyzed the artifact. Their finding, it was made of aluminum mixed with silicon and copper. Common and engine parts, the isotopic ratios were terrestrial. But the report added something interesting. An extraterrestrial source could not be ruled out. No one knows what it is, Jose said. He held onto that artifact his entire life. Not as proof of danger, as proof of something else. That they came. They crashed. And a little boy tried to help. So why do we assume aliens are scary? Why do our minds go immediately to invasion, experimentation, danger? Psychologists have studied this. In 1993, researchers at Carleton University in Ottawa tested people who reported alien encounters. They compared them to people who'd never had such experiences. They're finding UFO reporters are no less intelligent, no more fantasy-prone, and no more likely to suffer from mental disorders than anyone else. But they did find something interesting. Many of the most terrifying abduction experiences have a natural explanation. It's called sleep paralysis. Between 10 and 15% of people experience it. You wake up or half wake and find yourself completely unable to move. You feel a presence in the room, sometimes malevolent, sometimes watching. One study participant described it perfectly. The next thing I felt was some presence trying to get inside my brain. I couldn't open my eyes or move. I wanted to escape. Unsure I was wide awake, but I was entirely paralyzed. Sound familiar? The brain in that state tries to make sense of the paralysis. It creates a narrative, a presence, an intruder. And in a culture saturated with alien imagery, that presence takes a familiar form. But here's the thing. Not every encounter is sleep paralysis. Not every witness is hallucinating. The Kelly family wasn't asleep. Jose Padilla wasn't paralyzed. Something else is happening. Something we don't fully understand. Think about the encounters we've explored tonight. The Kelly creatures who watched and reached but never harmed. Jose Padilla's visitors who crashed and needed help. Even the terrifying Soviet story, if it's true, was a response to attack. They were shot at first. What if we've been wrong about aliens all along? What if they're not invaders? What if they're explorers, scientists, accidentally crashed tourists? We assume any civilization advanced enough to reach us would also be powerful enough to destroy us. But power doesn't always mean aggression. Think about our own explorers. When they encountered isolated tribes, what happened? Sometimes violence, but sometimes curiosity, sometimes exchange. Sometimes the explorers were the ones who needed help. Maybe the truth about alien encounters is simpler than we imagine. Maybe they're just visiting, watching, wondering like we wonder about them. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider this. If there is someone out there watching us, maybe they're not waiting to attack. Maybe they're waiting for us to stop being afraid. Maybe they're waiting for us to wave back. The encounters we've explored are real. The witnesses are credible. The questions remain unanswered. But one thing is clear: fear is not the only response. Maybe not even the appropriate one. Curiosity, wonder, openness. These are the gifts these stories offer. Let them carry you now. Let the questions drift. Let the mysteries remain unsolved. You don't need to be afraid of the dark. Something might be out there, but that doesn't mean it wants to hurt you. Good night.